There lived a village named Umuogo. Umuogo was a unique village. It sat between gentle hills and had a river nearby that shone brightly under the sunlight. Birds sang sweetly, and the palm trees swayed, making soft, soothing sounds like they were sharing old stories. The soil was so fertile that crops seemed to grow as if by magic, and the river never ran dry, even in the hottest seasons. Children played freely in the open fields, their laughter ringing out like the sound of bells, while the elders sat under the iroko tree, sharing stories that carried the wisdom of generations. The villagers lived in harmony, working together to farm the rich lands and fish from the bountiful river. The air was always filled with the smell of fresh yam roasting over fire pits, the tangy sweetness of ripe mangoes, and the comforting aroma of simmering soups made with freshly harvested vegetables and herbs. Each family had their role, and everyone's contribution was valued. No one went hungry in Umuogo, for the people believed that when one ate, all should eat. The people of Umuogo were proud of their heritage and the land they called home. They believed their village was blessed by the gods, who had gifted them fertile lands and abundant resources. At the heart of the village stood a sacred grove, where the villagers gathered during festivals to thank the gods for their blessings. Despite its small size, Umuogo was a village of great importance in the region. Traders from neighboring villages would travel long distances to exchange goods at the bustling market square. The market was a colorful tapestry of life, women with baskets of smoked fish balanced on their heads, men bargaining over piles of yam, and children chasing one another through the crowd. It was said that anything you needed could be found in the Umuogo market, from the freshest produce to the finest hand-woven cloth. There was a woman named Adeku, a very beautiful widow known for her wisdom and her ability to heal with herbs. She was a pillar of strength in the community, always ready to help those in need. Her son, Chima, was a bright and curious boy who spent his days exploring the forest and dreaming of the future. Then there was Obina, Adeku's brother-in-law, a man whose charm masked a heart filled with ambition and envy. He was known for his cunning ways, but the villagers respected him because he came from a family of wealth and influence. But as idyllic as life seemed in this peaceful village, change was on the horizon. Beneath the surface of harmony, a storm was brewing. Greed, jealousy, and betrayal, emotions that had no place in a village so blessed, were beginning to take root. Obina, with his cunning mind and insatiable desire for power, he executed a conspiracy that disrupted the peace that Umuogo had enjoyed for generations. Adeku, the wise widow, and her young son, Chima, were inhabitants of the peaceful village of Umuogo, known for its harmony and lush farmlands. They had been living by themselves since Adeku's husband died mysteriously, leaving behind vast farmland, livestock, and wealth. However, her husband's younger brother, Obina, was a cunning man driven by greed. When Adeku's husband passed, Obina began scheming to take over the inheritance, claiming that Adeku and her son were too weak to manage it. Obina manipulated the village elders, spreading lies about Adeku. With their support, he seized the land and wealth, forcing Adeku and Chima to move to a small hut by the river. Despite their hardship, Adeku remained steadfast, reminding her son that the wicked never go unpunished. He wasted no time exploiting the farmland and hired young men from the village, overworking them and paying them very little. His greed grew with his riches, but so did the resentment of the villagers. To help his mother, Chima secretly learned how to hunt and began hearing whispers about his uncle's evil deeds. One day, while hunting in the forest, he met a mysterious old man who told him, when evil is planted, it always bears fruit. Chima didn't fully understand but felt the weight of the man's words. Meanwhile, Obina continued to expand his wealth, but when a famine struck Umuogo, his greed became unbearable. His barns were full of food, but he sold it at outrageous prices, ignoring the cries of the hungry. Adeku, with her small vegetable farm, shared what little she had with starving villagers. Her kindness earned her their respect, while Obina mocked her generosity, calling it foolish. However, the famine was only the beginning of Obina's troubles. One by one, his livestock started dying mysteriously, and his barns caught fire. Villagers began whispering that Obina's greed had brought a curse upon him. One evening, Chima overheard Obina confessing to poisoning his elder brother years ago to take over the inheritance. Chima was filled with anger but chose to bide his time. Meanwhile, Obina's health and wealth deteriorated. Desperate, he sought the help of a sorcerer, who warned him that his greed had angered the gods. The only way to lift the curse, the sorcerer said, was to purify his heart. Chima started gathering evidence of his uncle's crimes, speaking to villagers who had suffered under Obina's exploitation. The village elders were finally convinced of Obina's guilt, and they returned the land and wealth to Adeku and Chima. The council banished Obina from the village, but Adeku, in her wisdom, pleaded for mercy. She said, "Forgiveness is the path to true peace," and the council allowed Obina to stay, but only if he worked to repay the villagers he had wronged. Despite his punishment, Obina secretly plotted revenge. However, fate had other plans. A terrible storm struck the village, leaving Obina and Chima stranded together. Forced to cooperate to survive, Obina began opening up about his childhood jealousy of his elder brother, admitting that bitterness had consumed him. Chima, though careful, reminded him of the priest's prophecy. Only a pure heart can lift the curse. Obina started helping Chima rebuild the village's farmlands. At first, the villagers were skeptical, but as Obina began performing selfless acts, like helping widows and returning stolen goods, they saw a change in him. Adeku, ever the teacher of forgiveness, guided him to understand the value of community. Slowly, Obina earned back the trust of the villagers. The curse that had plagued Obina's life began to lift. His health improved, crops grew again, and the village thrived. A festival was held to celebrate the newfound unity in Umuogo. During the celebration, Obina stood before the entire village, confessed all his wrongdoings, and begged for forgiveness. The villagers forgave him, showing that redemption is possible for those who truly repent. Obina dedicated the rest of his life to serving the community. He became a teacher, sharing his story to warn others about the dangers of greed. Adeku's farm flourished, and Chima opened a school to teach children about justice and kindness. When Obina fell ill many years later, he passed away peacefully, surrounded by the family he once wronged. The village of Umuogo became a symbol of forgiveness and redemption, inspiring neighboring communities. Chima, now a father, named his son after his late father, honoring the family's restoration. Adeku, in her old age, taught her grandchildren the greatest lesson of all: hate destroys, but love rebuilds. Adeku lived to see her son Chima grow into a wise and respected man in the village. The school he built became a beacon of hope, teaching children not only reading and writing but also the values of kindness, humility, and forgiveness. Many of the children who attended the school came from families that Ik had once wronged, and through their education, the next generation grew up learning to avoid the mistakes of the past. Chima's wife, Neka, was a compassionate woman who shared his vision for a better future. Together, they worked tirelessly to ensure that every child, no matter how poor, had access to education. They introduced storytelling sessions in the evenings, where elders would share tales of the village's history and the lessons learned from Ik's redemption. These stories became a tradition, passed down from one generation to the next. Meanwhile, Obina's transformation continued to impact the village long after his death. The shrine he built to honor his elder brother became a place of reflection for villagers. People would come to the shrine to pray, seek guidance, and remind themselves of the importance of living righteously. Obina's story, once a tale of greed and destruction, became a story of hope and second chances. Chima also began documenting the village's history, writing down not only the events of his own life but also the stories of the elders who had shaped the community. His book, titled The Heart of Umuogo, became widely read in neighboring villages. It was filled with wisdom, proverbs, and lessons about the dangers of greed, the power of forgiveness, and the strength of unity. As the years went by, the village of Umuogo flourished. The communal farm, which Chima and Obina had started together, grew into a model of cooperation and prosperity. Villagers worked together, sharing both the labor and the harvest. The farm became so successful that it attracted visitors from other villages who wanted to learn their methods. One of the most significant moments came when a delegation from a far-off village visited Umuogo, seeking advice on how to resolve their internal disputes. Chima welcomed them warmly, sharing the story of his uncle and how the village overcame its darkest times through forgiveness and collaboration. The delegation left inspired, and soon after, news spread that their village had begun implementing the lessons they learned from Umuogo. Adeku, now weak but still sharp-minded, continued to be the guiding light of the village. She spent her days surrounded by her grandchildren, telling them stories of her youth and reminding them of the values that had sustained their family. She often said, "No matter how dark the night, the dawn will come. But only those with patience and love will see the light clearly." When Adeku passed away peacefully in her sleep, the entire village mourned her loss. Her funeral was a grand celebration of her life, attended by villagers and visitors from far and wide. Chima, heartbroken but proud of his mother's legacy, stood before the crowd and recited her favorite proverb, "A tree with deep roots cannot be shaken." After her burial, Chima continued her work, ensuring that the village remained a place of peace and unity. Over time, Umuogo became a hub of culture and learning, with people from other communities visiting to hear its stories, learn its farming techniques, and participate in its festivals. The lessons of the village, carried forward by Chima and the generations that followed, became timeless truths that resonated far beyond their small community. Greed may have once threatened to destroy their way of life, but through love, forgiveness, and hard work, Umuogo became a shining example of how even the darkest times can lead to brighter futures. And so, the story of Umuogo lived on, a testament to the strength of the human spirit and the enduring power of redemption.